Hi class, today we're going to talk about After Effects, and this is an intro video that's going to talk about the 5 key components of After Effects. Now, After Effects is a program that's basically a Photoshop and Premiere Pro merged together. So thinking about Photoshop that we have worked with and Premiere Pro, which maybe or you might not have worked with before, which deals with video, and we create this space where we can use video and our bitmap graphics or vector graphics together to create motion. So think about After Effects as Photoshop in motion, hence the name Motion Graphics, and we're working with time-based media. So these are all words that we've been working with, but now this is a little bit more advanced and a different program. So it should be fun to work with and kind of get a preview for this next program. So I'm going to open After Effects, and I have After Effects Creative Cloud and 2015. And you might see this welcome screen, which you can just close out of. We're not going to use that. And this is the general interface. So just to talk a little bit about what we're looking at, because it can feel overwhelming at first. So first thing, the toolbar is horizontal here across the top. And you'll see a lot of familiar tools that you probably have seen in Photoshop or Premiere Pro, whatever you are familiar with. A hand, a magnifying glass, typography, clone stamp, all that good stuff. So our tools are across here. On the top left, this is our projects, and this is kind of like a bin of all your stuff. And I'm going to be putting in a lot of stuff in here, basically almost many different formats are capable of being in the projects palette. So we can put PSDs, AIs, TIFFs, dot moves, MP3s, all can go in here. And you can utilize these then in your composition. So we're going to bring some stuff in here. We'll come back to that in 1 second. Here's composition. This is kind of your canvas. This is your work area. Now, right here, we have none. We haven't started anything yet, but we will in a second. On the right side, we have our info. We have the preview, which we can play, rewind, go to the next frame. You might have libraries here if you're signed into your Creative Cloud account. Right behind that is effects and presets, which we're going to work with a little bit later, not today. And then down here, we have our timeline. So let's bring some stuff in so we can actually work and see how everything plays together. So the first thing you really need to know about is compositions, right? It's like making a new document in Photoshop or Illustrator, this is our file new, and creating a space. So I'm going to go up to my composition and say new composition. This is where we're going to actually build our graphics. And I'm going to recommend that you come here to the size, and some of these sizes might be new to you. There's all these different parameters based on what you're creating for. But for us, we're just going to use the HDTV 720 29.97. And that will automatically set a width and height. It's automatically going to set a frame rate. So a frame rate is how many frames per second. So an FPS. So in 1 second, it's going to run through almost 30 frames. That's super quick, and that's why video is so crisp and not choppy. Like an animated GIF, choppy. The frame per second is a lot lower on an animated GIF. So down here, I'm just going to show half the resolution, only because I don't want to have to waste time with this completely rendering every time we want to play. And here's how long we want our composition. So not only do we have to worry about width and height, but we also want to think about the duration. So this is going to play for 5 seconds, which is fine. But if we wanted this to be 10 seconds, I would change this time to be that. I'm going to close that out. So I'm going to come back here, set this for 5. And here's my background color, which depending what you want to work with. I like to work with white only because I'm so familiar with Photoshop. So I'm going to keep it that way. After all these parameters are set, you can press OK. Now that we have our actual canvas that we can start working on our composition, you can see here, oops, I have two because I had that one. I could come over here to my project and it puts it directly in here, and I'm going to rename this. So if I control click on comp 2 or comp 1, I'm going to rename this to be example. You can see how you can make these compositions and rename them in the project palette. You can also nest compositions within compositions. So just like nesting in HTML, we can put other divs within divs. Here we can put compositions within compositions, which we will later on. With all these things, it's important to remember that as we bring assets in, it's not embedding them into After Effects, it's linking to the location. So two ways that we can import. First would be file, import. Here you can do a file or multiple files, or you can just double click in this palette area. So in this general parameter, I can just double click and it's gonna say, hey, where's all my stuff? And I'm gonna bring in all these different things, just for an example. So I have an AI I'm bringing in, I have a poster PNG, and a movie. I'm not even sure what these things are, but let's bring them in and check them out. So you can see here, it just kind of places them in there. And then what I can do is when I'm ready, I can drag them over here to this composition. So you can drag and drop from here over here. Notice when you bring it from that project into the composition, it automatically appears down here in my timeline. Now, this timeline is very important, because the timeline is going to have layers. And you can see I just brought one layer in. I'm going to bring in another layer and place that in. And it's the perfect size. And I'm going to bring this poster in. So what we have here, if you look in our layers, I have 3 layers. And just like Photoshop, this is going to have a hierarchy based on order. So if I want that movie all the way in the back, I'm going to bring that down to the bottom. And if I want my AI at the top, I'm going to bring that to the top. And you can see that has changed the order of this. And you can move things around and do what you have to do. I'm going to scale this down because it's a little bit overwhelming. You can see you can use this as a transform. I'm just going to place it down there in the bottom. I'm going to place this over here. So we're not creating any animation right now. We're just kind of positioning our elements. You can kind of see how nice this graphic is on top. So with that being said, I'm going to delete this poster. And how I'm going to delete it is just press delete on the keyboard and it will rid a layer. So now we're down to 2. So you can see how to add layers and subtract them. Now again, layers are very similar to Photoshop that is creating hierarchy, and it's creating hierarchy vertically as well as horizontally. So we just talked about how vertically we are working with hierarchy, but now if we come over to this side, you can see here that this timeline is how we're going to create hierarchy horizontally. And this is where it actually plays. And if I hit spacebar, you can see how this will play through. It's a really short video that has audio, but pressing spacebar is how we can play and stop very quickly. Now, what else I can use is the preview over here, where I can rewind back to the beginning of my timeline, play, stop, loop, not loop, go to the last frame. You can use these, or I can come up here to this little kind of diamond shape and scrub through my timeline to kind of see where I'm looking for my correct part of what I'm looking for. Now let's say I'm looking for a very specific time on my timeline. I can come over here and actually just plug in a number. So let's say I want to do something at 2 seconds. So I'm going to plug that in. Now I'm scrubbed right to 2 seconds. So I don't have to worry again about, fine tuning. Now I can also zoom in and out here using the horizontal layering of frames. And we have this all here. So this is our layers palette, super important. that we're going to be using for previewing and building our keyframes and animations. Now, two more things I want to show you here is if I come over to the timeline, come down to the bottom. Down here, I mean, there's a ton of little things here. And if you roll over, I'm not going to go through them all right now because we're not going to be utilizing them all. But you can see here we can show or hide. We can collapse transformations for vectors. There's effects, all motion blur, and all this good stuff. And if you roll over, you can read each one of these. Now, these are all switches that you can turn on and off. Coming down here where it says toggle switches and modes, if I click that, it changes to blend modes. And what this is going to look a lot like is Photoshop. So here I could do a multiply or screen or whatever I want to do here. Where's my multiply? There it is. And you can see how that multiplies and blends those two layers together. This is going to be really handy, maybe not in our specific project, but in the future. I love blending modes and I love creating this unity by using them. So that is very popular to use with our modes. Again, zooming in and out is the same as Photoshop or Illustrator with Control plus for a Mac. I'm sorry, Control plus for a PC, Command plus for a Mac. And we have this here. So let's just come over here. I want to show you one more thing and then we'll move on. If I come over to the name of the layer and I arrow down on it. Now, one you can see here, we have our eyeball with hides and shows. Here's the sound if I want to turn it on or off. This little dot will solo that layer. So say I don't want to see any other layer except that one layer. You can just hit that little solo circle, lock the layer, and then that arrow down. In arrow down is all the things that you can transform here. These are all the things that we're going to be moving and grooving and doing all that good stuff for our animation. So anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. And we're going to get into all of those in the next tutorial. But just showing where they are in your layers so we can hop right back and work at that. Now you can notice if we go to sky, we have some different parameters because we have audio too. So here I can actually turn the audio down. And can't do much here with the waveform, but we can do a lot of the same transformations that shows right here. So we're kind of just arrowing down and nesting into that different layers. So that's really helpful to see. Now, let's go to the next part, which is actual animation. So what we're going to learn in the next tutorial is how to animate things. And then the following tutorial, we're going to learn about these effects. Now, in here, we have a lot of effects that are very similar, and I'll do one just to the sky. Very similar to Photoshop. So if I go up to my navigation, I can go to Effect and see all these different effects that we can use. So I'll just go to Blur and go to Fast Blur here. Oh, maybe I should have that. Let's try again. Oh, sorry, it's up here. And if I come over here, if you noticed, let me get rid of this one because I put two. What it's going to do is when we're here and we go to Effect, Blur, it's going to put it on top of your project. So it kind of is a pop-up, which at first I didn't see either because I just did not notice. But over here, it has all the parameters. So you can see here there's project with all our bin of assets and then the fast blur. Now here is where I can actually blur and have a little bit more control. And let's say we wanted that blurred out. Here you can play with that. And like anything else, you could put more than one filter or effect onto this video, or I could put more than one onto my illustration. So you can see how we're starting to layer and put different effects on different layers. Now, just for fun, let's do one quick animation so you get a little bit of a feeling, and I'll animate this illustration. So what I'm going to do is just kind of have it pop out of the sky. And I'm going to come over here, and a lot of the times when we're working with animation, we work backwards. So with that being said, I know here at 2 seconds, I want the animation to be there. So I'm going to hit, let's do scale. I'm at the correct position at 2 seconds. I'm hitting my little time clock that's saying, all right, let's make a keyframe. And then I'm going to come down here to 0, scrub down, hit this little triangle, and I'll come over here to the side, which is going to make another keyframe. And for this one, I'm going to scale this all the way down to 0. So keyframes are time blocks, and we use them in Photoshop, and we also use keyframes in HTML5 animation. And here we are doing it again by setting my keyframe here on 0, 0, 0, and then setting my keyframe here for 2 seconds. And they look like little diamonds on the bottom, so you know they're set appropriately. Now, we don't even have to do any tweening. After Effects does that for us, and you can see how that just pops right up there. So that is animation. So we're setting it there in the layers and setting our keyframes. And again, you notice how I set the first one at the finish mark and then went back to the beginning. It makes life a lot easier. One last thing I want to show you before we are done getting a quick tutorial of the interface is rendering. So when you're done with this, I wouldn't send this After Effects document to the client. I would render it. And rendering it is basically creating a QuickTime video that can be viewed outside of After Effects. And how you do that is you're going to go Composition, Add to Render Queue. Now, another way that may be in more advanced tutorials, you would add it to Adobe Media Encoder, which has a lot more options, but adding to Render Queue is perfect for us in this class. So I'm going to hit that. You can see down here the timeline kind of popped away. It's right behind. Everything's tabbing out. But here I can see all my render options. So what I can do here is say what I want this to be rendered at. If I click that, we'll have it set at the best. That's fine. And then I'm going to come over here and say, where do you want it to go? So I'm going to come here and I'm going to put it on my desktop as example. And here's loose list. Now this is important. So the output module lets you have a lot of functions that could be overwhelming. But the one thing you might want to do here is we do want it set as a QuickTime. But I might want to change my format options of video output to be H.264. This again is very similar to the Photoshop when we output. It would be an H.264. It's very compressed. It's almost like a JPEG version of video, but the quality is still really good. So I'm just going to change that one setting there and then say OK. And everything looks good. I'm going to come over to this little button that's a render right here in the top right of the render queue. I'm going to hit that, and what's going to happen is it's going to render. You can see it going across, and sometimes this takes a while if you have a longer video or longer time. You hear that magic sound, and then I come over here, and I'm going to go to my desktop, go to example.move, which is what I called it, and here it is, 5 seconds of video. Looks great. So you can see the sky's blurred, and you can also see our illustration pop in. All right, and that is the quick tutorial about the 5 key components of After Effects.